Welcome back to a special edition, Atlanta Showdown kickoff edition. What a game we have, Florida State and Alabama. And joining me to talk about it is Tony Tsoukalas, Bama Insider, Ryan Clark, Warchant.com. I'm Jeff Cameron of ESPN Radio. As we continue our series here, we look at Florida State's offensive line versus Alabama's defensive line. Ryan, I think this is by far the most intriguing matchup. Maybe not the most exciting, but one that will help decide the game maybe more than any other. And if you look at Alabama, we know year in and year out, even when they lose guys like they lose Jonathan Allen this year, they've got so much talent there, so much size. You can just assume it'll be the same this year. I know we've already looked at that depth chart, but for Florida State fans watching this is an offensive line that year in and year out comes under fire, is always in question. And when they're really good, as they were in 2013, the team can win a national title. But they're spotty. And they're replacing a lot of guys and moving other guys around. So let's talk about that unit, this offensive line for Florida State, as you see it playing out.
You know, it's interesting because, I mean, you said it so well in that every offseason it's always a question. I think this year it's maybe the biggest question facing this team because you look everywhere else. I mean, yes, you've got questions at running back and receiver, but at least there's some semblance of a personnel. Whereas if here, based off of what we saw in spring, it seems like maybe there's 4 starters, maybe. But I think really the big question with this team is what goes forward at center. But I guess before we get into that, when you look at this team as a whole, I mean, let's put it like this. If Alec Eberle starts, he is your most experienced lineman with over 20 career starts. And yes, while you have experience, maybe you lose athleticism by not going with Andrew Baselli or Bavian Johnson. But if you go with a younger center, then do you know who the most experienced lineman is? It's Landon Dickerson with 7 career starts.
Yeah, the same Landon
Dickerson who's coming off of a knee surgery. And as I always put it, the same Landon Dickerson who is younger than Google. So it's an interesting situation. But I think when you look at this line from left to right, Josh Ball is someone they're very high on. But Josh Ball is replacing Roderick Johnson, who is the 2-time ACC blocking trophy winner of the year. And so that's something to keep in mind. You look at what you have at left guard. The thought is it's probably going to be Cole Minshew, someone they've been very high on, who he's had his injury issues, but there's him. We'll get to center in a second. You look at right guard. That's Landon Dickerson's position. I mean, he is, I think, easily the most talented offensive lineman they have. And then when you look at right tackle, it seems like it's going to be year 2.0 of the Rick Leonard experiment. I mean, he's had a full season. He's had 2 springs, and they've been high on him ever since that transition from defensive end to right tackle. So if not Leonard, then Rubel, but I would think that it would be Leonard at this point.
And in spring, for those that don't know, that was the hard part of trying to judge spring, right? They didn't really have their full group that you expect to have. Really, it was just kind of patchwork, working guys in. So it's hard to know what they had coming out of spring.
Well, it was. And I mean, when you think about just, again, going back to center, Alec Eberle was out with a hip flexor injury, so there's that. And so it left it between Baselli, Bavian Johnson, and then Corey Martinez, a name that a lot of people know. Andrew Baselli ends up getting injury, and so really you're now left with Bavian Johnson and Corey Martinez for the spring. And Bavian Johnson's the one taking the reps. And so since this is the time to do it, you look at what they've got at center. On one hand, you've got someone in Eberle who experienced, he knows the calls, he's someone that the line genuinely likes and seems like a good guy to pee around and have. But then you look at column B and you look at Andrew Baselli, someone who, I mean, yes, he's Tony Baselli's son. Let's just go ahead and get that out the way. But he's someone that he seems to pick up things quickly, pretty athletic guy, and someone that we've heard Jimbo Fisher talk about in the past. But then there's Bavian Johnson, who, look, he was part of that 2016 recruiting class with Baselli. He was the #1 center in America. You're talking about someone who is 6'3", 6'4", and is around 325.
Yeah, he's a
I mean, like and he lost weight actually. And you like what you have there, and you go, he's certainly someone to keep an eye on. But you wonder, because there were questions about how well does he snap the ball. And as we saw last year, look, this offensive line needs to do whatever it can to make DeAndre Francois' life easy, because if it doesn't, it's going to be a long season. And so that's why when you look at this line, whoever wins that center battle, I think that's going to really dictate what the year is going to be like. But furthermore, I think it's what's going to really dictate how this game against Alabama goes in terms of providing protection for Francois, but also clearing running lanes, whether it be for Jaquez, Patrick Camakers, or Emil Rasul.
So as you can hear, Tony, a lot of question marks for Florida State along the offensive line, and that's a group that has to find a way to keep DeAndre Francois upright. He got killed by a lot of people last year, and none of them were Alabama, who most would say have an infinitely superior group of talent on defense. Talk about that defensive line.
If you want an example of how Alabama can recruit, you look at the defensive line, because you're replacing possibly the best defensive lineman in college football last year in Jonathan Allen, and another very solid defensive lineman in Dalvin Tomlinson. And normally for most defensive lines, that'd be killer, that'd be lights out. But you're replacing Jonathan Allen with Deshaun Hand, who was the #1 overall recruit in Rivals in 2014. What college can do that? Deshaun Hand hasn't played yet, and I mean he has in sub roles, but
the #1 guy comes in and has to sit.
Yeah, until he's a senior.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah.
It's been a minute since 2014, and he's a guy that was supposed to be better than what Jonathan Allen was. So I mean, Alabama fans are really excited about what he has to bring. He's really excited. It's kind of his time to shine. He's the big one I would watch is Deshaun Hand, athletic kid, numbers off the boards. I mean, you could see him having a good year and maybe shooting up and being a first-round pick. Even though he hasn't done anything yet, he's somebody that you wouldn't be surprised if he did that. And then you got, on the other side, Isaiah Buggs most likely will take that role of Dalvin Tomlinson, and that's a 5-star, the top JUCO kid from this year's class. I mean, another guy, plug-and-play kind of guy, it seems like it. He's from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. That Mississippi JUCO, Alabama's had a lot of success from that. The last person they pulled from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College was Terrence Cody.
Worked out.
Yeah, it worked out. It's a different position. Of course, Terrence Cody was more the middle guy, and Isaiah Buggs is more of an edge rusher. But they've had a lot of success from that junior college, and he looks like he's going to be falling in that mold of just plug-and-play kind of guys. And then in the middle, you can't forget about Deron Payne, probably the most athletic defensive lineman Saban's ever had. Here's a guy that could play on the edge and in the middle. And
so it's funny, in hearing you two talk, there's a group that is perhaps the most star-studded that you're describing right there, or certainly with the highest amount of potential with all the 5 stars, and this is the biggest question mark for Florida State. I think that leads me to assume that if we're going to give edges here, we're going to say Alabama has the edge in this matchup, just a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a big edge.
Yeah.
Just all the talent. Yeah, I think they could make it a long night.
We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, we don't want to assume anything just yet, but on paper, the matchup goes to Alabama there without question. And we see 2 quarterbacks that come into this game that are ultra talented, both very mobile. Containing these 2 quarterbacks is what we'll talk about next.